So our panel here is on blockchain and security. This is a discussion. I'm the moderator, Todd Erickson. You'll hear from me all day. But I'm going to start. I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves. So we'll start right here with Alex.
Thank you so much, Todd. I am Aleksandar Zelenovik. I'm with Sapient. So we are a global technology company that does emerging technology implementation across all the major enterprises, and is very much involved in the blockchain. So I have participated in building some of the first blockchain solutions in the federal government space, including the first blockchain solution built for procurement function in the world, either commercial or government.
I'm John Walsh. I work with SightSpan Security. We do quite a bit of physical security. I work specifically in the compliance area where we deal with counterterrorism, anti-money laundering, and security across the board.
I'm John Bridge. I'm with the U.S. Marshals Service. I am a blockchain hobbyist and also an advisor to a blockchain startup in Carolina.
All right. Well, thank you very much, guys. So we're going to get started here. Alec, one of the conversations we had, we talked about blockchain and security. I believe that you mentioned before, you talked about making the blockchain real. And I thought that was an interesting point in our conversation. What do you mean by that? Or describe that for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So blockchain is a pretty powerful technology, but on its own does nothing, right? So if you were to sort of install it somewhere, it's completely useless. So what you need to do is really find a business case and figure out how it adds to something. Clearly, the cryptocurrency is the strongest business case we see today, but there are others in supply chain, there are others in solving the problems of the global identity, marketing problems, advertising, and so on. So blockchain is real. What it really means is it can be configured properly to solve the toughest problem. The problem right now we have, and it's happened a lot with the hype, is that people see blockchains everywhere. They see them in, we're just joking, toilet bowls. They see them everywhere. Like blockchains are there. Well, maybe one day in there, but before then, I think we have a much better uses.
Right. Well, and you mentioned that you were the first one to get blockchain in procurement, which, and I guess I would say, I know we're talking about security, but I guess procurement, when we talk about that, why procurement? Why was that the first place that you would start? And I was going to say, when I think security, I suppose procurement is I think finance, but not necessarily blockchain.
Yeah, so procurement or acquisition is pretty complex, right? It involves elements of finance, and involves elements of figuring out what you need to buy. But in procurement, nobody trusts nobody, right? So if you're buying something from someone, and because nobody trusts nobody, we are verifying and re-verifying, and that's eating time. And if that's eating time, it's eating money and creating enormous inefficiencies. Just think about it in the energy sector, right? You think about it, you have an enormous shipment of oil, right? And you need to sell it and buy it. And if you're spending 90 to 100 days doing that, times money, that's a lot of money. Well, how about using blockchain and getting that right like this? That's where you get enormous value in the speed of transaction. That cuts a lot of costs.
So when we talk about security, obviously nobody trusts nobody is the decentralized model, right? I mean, that's actually very, very good for that. So I'm going to go over here. We're going to come back to a couple things there, and then let me go to John. I know that you're in compliance and security, and you talked about cybersecurity. So I guess what are you seeing as the top risks today? I mean, I would say years ago there were maybe scaling problems. What are the top couple of items today from a security perspective or cybersecurity that you think are in the market today?
Thank you. I'm going to follow up on something that Alex said in a sense. Nobody trusts nobody, and that's what I deal with for a living. Every time I get called in, it's because somebody doesn't trust somebody, and I have to go validate whether it was an accurate trade or whether it was an accurate transaction of any type. I think one of the things that we need to do in this industry is start communicating very effectively, knowing we're not trusted. Now that doesn't mean we're bad, but like when I started out doing e-commerce, when I was a foreign exchange trader and then went online, nobody trusted me then either. And now that's commonplace. So I think what we need to do is understand that nobody trusts nobody. So they don't trust us. We have to build a better business case, be able to articulate what we're doing very clearly. one of the risk factors that I see for a lot of projects, and we spoke about this as a group earlier, I work with a lot of CEOs of corporate banks and large trading organizations, and the CEO, the CFO, or the COO can't describe any of the blockchain projects. That's not a good spot to be, because that puts those projects at risk. They all say, we have a blockchain project, we're a cool firm, but they can't describe it. So that's a risk to me.
Right.
And then from a compliance perspective, when you're dealing with anything with the public or you're dealing in a trading environment, we have to start understanding that the rules, and somebody said it earlier today, a gentleman that I agree with 100%, we don't want more rules applied on it from a regulatory perspective than necessary, but the rules that are applied across the board, we have to accept them and embrace them. And we have to do that at conferences, we have to do that in meetings, we have to do it during audits. We're sending a message across that we don't need to do this. And I think collectively as an organization and as an industry, we just need to learn how to communicate more effectively. And we also need to collectively argue when somebody crosses the line into a regulatory or a recommendation that doesn't fit us as an industry.
Right, perhaps some overreach. Or perhaps I think what happened in Texas and North Carolina, where it was going to be excluding constituents if they didn't make some change.
Correct.
So I would say that's a good catch.
Going to your follow-up question, I think one of the, when you're looking at what are the issues facing blockchain startups, it's not going to be much different from what's facing the rest of the business world. Breaches, data loss, not having a good security system in place at the outset. Social engineering is big. If you get someone in your organization that doesn't understand what type of attacks are common, then you run the risk of losing keys or having someone download malware into a system. So I think that really there's great innovation happening in this space, and it's great, but I think one of the first things that these innovators need to look at, a lot of times their ideas are grand, but they're not looking at the simple things like security at the outset. So I think incorporating that more on the front end when these ideas are being developed is essential.
Right. Some of the old tricks are the best tricks, phishing an email or malware or keyloggers. You're right, all the security in the world with blockchain, if somebody has access to your phone and it has you, they can do all sorts of things. Right. And sometimes starting with the very physical layer type of security, right? Blockchain can only secure transactions from change, but if you're the one that's just now running the rest of it, could be very good. Now, one thing that we had talked about earlier, on our conference call, we talked about like the security in the blockchain. I think we talked about new blockchains or new projects versus mature projects. And I know, Alec, I think you had mentioned something like, do you build a new blockchain for every project, or do you use things like Hyperledger or open source? So what are your thoughts on, should everybody create a new blockchain every time they start a project?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're in a world where everybody creates a new blockchain. And actually, you can buy a book and use a little bit of Java coding, and there you go.
I made Todd Coin, so I didn't ICO it though. Nobody's ever bought a coin.
Fair enough. And there's a time for that, and then there are good solutions and bad solutions like anything else. But here's a proposition. If you take a platform and pick an open source platform like a Hyperledger, fantastic and supported by all major enterprises, is relatively secure against the malware and things like that. You have to have other layers of security. But I mean, as a blockchain, it's a good starting point. Then you can start building your layers of your security and things you need. And to be honest, the fascination with the blockchain, at least for me, comes from the ability to shape a business problem. I think you're going to get the technology right. So why don't we use secure technology that you can lean on, that gets improved over time, and it gets better and better. One thought with this is also fascinating to me. Like, for example, in a Hyperledger, you're using the Byzantine fault tolerance algorithm, right? So rather than proof of work, which obviously saves the energy and all that kind of stuff. But if you go back to it, right? So it's also interesting. The Hyperledger, you can just swap that for the new algorithm, new consensus algorithm. So those things give you a lot of flexibility. So it's much better to start with something like, why would you invent Java today? Like, you just have Java. It's open, just writing it. The same thing goes with the open source. It's just going to bring a lot more security. I worry that at least with so many different blockchain things that got insecure, we heard about these hacks when somebody went on blockchain, when they put the child pornography in the nodes or whatever it was. it's just all the things that were not thought out well.
So, and you're, go ahead, John. I was going to say, yeah, because I think that's a very interesting point that, you know, the question is, right, I see a lot of energy and a lot of companies talk about new blockchain, making new technology, but is that all, when we have something that's already been around years, it's been tested, you know, do you build on top of that, or is it flashier?
Well, one of the things, I wanted to follow up on that because I agree, as an auditor, we do AML audits and we do technical audits all over the world, and we do hundreds of them. And when we go into a blockchain situation, if it's not done the way Alex described, we can't audit it. So in other words, we can do a proof of work and say, yes, they work this long, there's this many lines, and this is it, and it does kind of maybe possibly what it was intended to do. But the project scope of the projects are not clearly documented. The scope is changing on a regular basis. So if I go in and ask the original team of what is the use case, and the team at the end, very seldom is it the same. So if you go into traditional technologies, it's A plus B equals C, I can audit that.
Right.
So since we don't have any standardizations, it's very difficult to audit, and that creates risks. And some of those risks are, as you get more and more innovative as an individual, you're creating risk for everybody.
Right.
So you could have 3 or 4 projects like the child put on a case. You could have other cases where you have very corrupt people using very good tools, which could hurt everybody.
Yeah, that's it. And John, you want anything to add to that?
No, I think that.
They cover a lot of items there. Now, one of the other things that we talked about, what do you think, well, I know whenever security comes up, the two things that I know we talked about on the call were things like 51% attack, we talked about, you know, CPU, you know, in other words, securing the blockchain versus Hyperledger, which is, of course, you know, not a proof of work necessarily. But do we still, that concern seems to have, I don't hear as much about either, let's say, proof of work or algorithms. You know, are we happy with what we're doing now? And in terms of, from a security perspective, is there much innovation around that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, you know, we have to say I'm going to go to the very first, the original, you know, Bitcoin and all the technology. It's proven itself, right? It's working. A bunch of people don't trust, you know, each other from all over the globe. Made it work. Awesome. Check the box. Is that enough? No. When you start moving from a simple transaction like that to a more an environment where you may be storing medical data, global identities. Look at this, guys. Today we have about 2 billion people without identity. 2 billion. What if I give everybody identity on a blockchain, digital identity, right? Could I use a solution that's less secure? No. So I got to build on something much better, something much more robust. I think we have an experiment that's awesome. I think we can iterate through it, we can get to much better. Because I think blockchain is going to change the world fundamentally. It's going to change the way we do democracy in election. It's going to change the world. You know, you're going to be able to have $2 in Ghana and do the trade with somebody who sits in the United States in Brooklyn. And that'll be okay. And you have your identity, and you know, you're a refugee. You have your piece of paper, your name, right? Not anymore. You've been blockchain. You get your schooling. So when we have all of these things come in possibilities, we got to get serious about security. We got to get serious about building what I would call normal kinds of things. I think when we initially started this whole thing, it was great to prove it's working, it is working. Now we got to move on.
Yeah. What do you think? I know we talked a little bit about different, you know, blockchain attacks, and I think you had some.
Yeah. So again, you know, I think initially the idea of a 51% attack was, you know, that people thought it would be too expensive or too difficult. You know, and now we found that it's really not as expensive as we thought. People just running space and you know, running their algorithm, and we've seen it a couple times. So it's, I think it's more vulnerable for people that are that are running smaller blockchains or on different encryption. That if they, you know, if they were to use existing systems, it might make it less likely. So
right.
If you went more with a sidechain model or something along those lines, you may be
right. The existing commercial resources could be used to overwhelm a startup type of a technology that, you know, that could be where it's if you go on the blockchain, Bitcoin or whatever. And I did want to point out to the whole panel, which I thought was very interesting, is that if you look on the Cryptolina 2018, it says blockchain, digital assets, and ICOs. And I would say, don't you think that it's funny that most of our conversation today is not Bitcoin? In other words, Bitcoin was maybe the initial use case, I believe, that you talked about. But today we're talking about, I would say most of the speakers, including us, we're not talking just about Bitcoin anymore. We're not talking about just, Satoshi's peer-to-peer electronic cash. I guess we're talking about peer-to-peer electronic assets, perhaps, and something like that.
But something that you mentioned with Bitcoin, I think it's important because there was a slide up this morning
Yeah.
between Bitcoin and gold and various things,
Right.
and the ups and downs. Blockchain is just going up.
Right.
So, and I think it's very important. I remember when I spoke at the first conference, and it was a wonderful experience, and we spoke about Bitcoin, and we had some really healthy debates about all kinds of wonderful topics. And the technology is growing every year, and I think it's going, if you came back here in 2 years, it's going to be astronomically different than it is today. Bitcoin is still going to be traded like an asset. Gold is still traded, has been traded for 5,000 years. Bitcoins will be traded for as long as they're around, but blockchain is actually going to change the universe that we know in our daily lives.
So often we're going to hack all the houses at the same time, same moment to get in. It is a very, very powerful.
So you're seeing the vulnerabilities more being in legacy systems?
That's exactly right. Unfortunately, legacy systems are full of holes. If you have blockchain thinking you're going to fix it, well, not that simple.
Right. Blockchain is just not the solution maybe to everything.
But it's also like what we did years ago when we took banks and various other firms and put them on the internet and expected them to still be safe. We can't take legacy systems and put a blockchain and expect blockchain to be safe. Once you have an avenue in, the avenue is there. But I think one of the things too that I'd like to touch on, when we say don't trust anybody, we're not trusted, I truly believe people don't trust technology, but they do trust human beings to the point of stupidity. Right? So it's kind of like, we'll give our passwords away, and John knows this, for a living I used to trick people to get their passwords. So any technologist could build something. If I could get the password at the bar or somebody's out of somebody's trash can, I'm in. So one of the things we have to do when we're implementing these projects is remember security is not just in the code, security is in the thinking processes around it. And we, as a world, have not understood how to hold on to these technologies in a secure way yet, blockchain or otherwise. But I think when we implement blockchain and we talk about security, we also have to have human factors involved with that. It's not all about the code, it's about the human beings around it.
Right, the code can't prevent bad behavior.
No.
Like that. And I agree with the passwords, but I still look at I think the #1 cyber attack, or more, you saw Cryptolina, which, which it brings a lot of negative, Bitcoin thing, because they're all pay in Bitcoin, right? But it's coming in via email. Typically now it's an email with a link, to accounts payable. And so like I said, when you look at that, all the security in the world goes down to the guy in AP that clicks a link. And if that person's got malware or anything else like that, the next thing you know, all that's been compromised. Okay, we've got just about 3 minutes to kind of wrap up, and then we're going to start with our next one. So I'll just go around, and if you want to just give your last minute wrap up. Alec, what do you want to? What would be your final word on security?
So my final word, I would say, in a blockchain security and everything would be think about the use case, think about what business problem you're solving. It's not naive. That's why people pay me and my company a lot of money to figure that out. And that is a serious problem. I think once we become serious with how we use this technology, with the business mind, I think we're going to see a lot more development. Think about Uber. Right? Taxis have their applications for a long time. Did you ever use the taxi application to call a cab?
Never.
Never. I did. It was the same nonsense. All waiting, not showing up. It took Uber to create that transformation. I think the same thing is happening with blockchain now. I think we really have a true expertise to understand what's happening. You're gonna achieve a lot of interesting results.
Excellent. Done?
I think in closing, the only thing I would say, I work with a lot of startups, and one of the things, no matter how cool the technology is or how cool the project is, what is the basic core as if you were starting a lemonade stand? And you break it down into a lemonade stand and say, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? And if I took $1 million and put it on top of that lemonade stand, how would you protect it? It's the same thing. And we have to look at the basics. And I think sometimes we get so focused on the innovation that we forget the basics. So I just kind of look from a security perspective. If I put $1 million on this table, none of us would walk out and leave it there. So we have to be thinking sometimes we have to have advanced thinking, but we also have to have youthful thinking of starting a new business.
Right. Yeah, I would definitely say, I know that in the banking world, you know, you say there's nothing new under the sun, but you're right. You have to start with the basis of security, because everything, you know, everything has to build on that.
One thing I just want to, I give a lot of speeches on security, and I always ask people, why do they lock their windows and doors, and they give away their password? So like, really, there's not that much in your house. If I get all your medical records and all your money out of the bank by your passwords, why are you giving that away?
Right.
So we have to do that as corporations.
Why break into your house when I can just give you a copy of your password?
My advice is very simple for the startups out there. Day one, you should be thinking about security and build it into whatever you're building.
All right. Well, very good. Well, I was going to say thank you very much. Yeah, security. I was going to say I think that when a lot of our panels are talking about you know, legal assistance when you're starting, but you're correct. I mean, all it takes is you know, Equifax, what do they use, 145 million records. You know, you think at that point, you know, they missed because they didn't patch. And so you look at something like that, and you go, all the securities, all the firewalls, everything, you know, something as simple as that, you know, turns out to, and in most other companies you'd be insolvent. It's kind of surprising that they're not. Well, I was going to say that's a whole different topic. But so I was going to say thank you very much, gentlemen, and